In today's episode, we're sharing more about our field trip to Taliesin West.
And later, you'll meet Fred Prozzillo, the Nord McClintock Family Vice President of Preservation and Collections for the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
And you're listening to True Tales from Old Houses. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Stacy. Welcome home.
Thank you. I've been on the road I was actually on the road for almost 2 weeks. So although we're talking about Taliesin West today, my trip was extended, which we'll talk about maybe next week on the mini-sode. But yeah, I've just been home for, about 24 hours or so. My suitcase is still full. How long did it take you to empty your suitcase after our trip?
Not long. I'm a quick packer and unpacker, so.
Oh, you're one of those people. I am a very good packer, terrible unpacker.
Really?
Yeah. But before we get into today's episode, I do want to say a special thank you to our season 12 sponsors, the window course from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, Sutherland Wells, Repaint Studios, and Old House Hub from My Old House Fix.
Thank you so much, you guys.
I also have to say that for last week's minisode, I totally blew it and did not give our sponsor shout out at the top of the show like I was supposed to. So many thanks for last week's minisode to Sutherland Wells and Noonan Heritage Craftworks. I thought this would be a good time too to just mention that all of our sponsors and the coupon codes are right on the True Tales from Old Houses website. So if you ever find yourself stuck, if you want to make a purchase with one of our sponsors and you think, I know there's a coupon code, it's right there on the website for you.
Yes, and please use them. It's how they know that this is working.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when we were on our trip, we had a dinner. I remember distinctly we were sitting there at dinner and we were talking about ways that we can improve the show, make it better. And what was one thing that you told me? Do you remember?
I hope I gently said, I think announcements can move faster.
Okay. And I agree.
Was that it? Okay.
Yeah, that was the one. And yes, of course, you gently said it. So, announcements have always been this place where we could just sort of casually talk about things that were relevant to all of you who are listening. But I am told that we could make it faster. Today is not that day, apparently. But yes, it's coming.
Well, there's just so much going on. So it's hard to condense down.
There is just so much going on. The only thing I'm going to say today in the announcements portion is to send you to my website, blakehillhouse.com, where you can buy my new book, if you are so inclined, The Case for Historic Windows, The Truth About Energy Efficiency in Old Windows, and also to learn more and take advantage of early bird pricing for the 2 weekend window restoration workshops that I'm teaching this summer at Silver Lake. How'd I do, Daniel?
Is that it?
That's it. Short and sweet.
Oh my gosh. Well, the audience can let us know if we've overcorrected, but
right.
I enjoyed it thoroughly.
All right. I should have known by the glazed look in your eyes over the past few weeks that announcements were too long. So,
well, I hear them multiple times. So,
That's true. That's true. Maybe it's just a you problem, Daniel. I don't know.
Most things are.
Well, we do have some other things to talk about. So let's get back to our trip to Taliesin West.
Our trip of a lifetime.
A trip of a lifetime. Yes. There is a blog post over on True Tales from Old Houses. It does not count as an announcement, by the way, if I tell you this. There is the blog post with pictures from our trip. And so I'm debating whether to do a second blog post or not. I think I might. There might be 2 blog posts over there. Because you took great pictures that I didn't actually even see. And I had to put my crummy photos up there. And you're so much better at it.
We had a shared album meltdown that
yes.
I thought Stacy had all my photos. Yeah, the thing about that place is it's so beautiful from pretty much any angle that it's almost impossible to take a bad photo. So I thought your photos were great. So
okay, well, good. I noticed when I went to take them, I thought, gosh, I thought Daniel took better pictures than this. And then I was like, hell yeah, they're my pictures. That's why they're not so good.
I think I learned that don't try to make a shared album while you're waiting for your flight at the airport because it just will never go through.
When I was reflecting back on this trip, I realized that you had the night experience and I had the morning experience. This is the first time you and I have traveled together and we found out a little something about ourselves, didn't we?
Well, I feel like I knew this about you. I just found it hard to accept that you really would get up at 6:30 and take a 4-mile run or something crazy. I'm like, call me for breakfast. Goodbye.
But likewise, yes, while I was up in the morning watching the rabbits and the sunrise and feeling the little tiny bit of dampness that is in the Arizona desert in the morning, you were having a whole different experience at night when I was probably snoring. So go for it. Tell us what you saw at night.
I really was. So I'll start with, they gave us these badges that we were supposed to, wear around at all times. And they said in small writing at the bottom, unrestricted. And I'm like, well, you've given this to the wrong person. So
challenge accepted. Yes, go ahead.
So we had pretty much, buildings get locked up at night and stuff, but we had pretty much free reign of the entire place, which is sprawling because one thing I may have learned at some point, but completely forgot, was that one of the first things that the apprentices did there was build their own little desert shelters. So there's sort of the main campus, and then there's sort of slightly off of that, there's these little trails into the desert where you'll come upon these little shelters. So I just thought it was a really cool opportunity to get to explore all of that. Well, literally nobody's around. It's super late at night. The stars are out. I will fully admit I spent a fair amount of time just sort of watching the sky for UFOs. It didn't happen, but it doesn't mean it's not real.
What a report that would have been, right?
Exactly. We would have had so much more to talk about. But yeah, it just was magic. And there's sort of things that you see at night, like reflections in the reflecting pool and things that you just don't get during the day. So it was just a really special experience. And I tried to take good advantage of the unique opportunity to just walk around unsupervised.
Unrestricted, as they say.
Unrestricted. Yeah, it was just wow. And then you, with your bright and early, did you see more wildlife in the morning?
I expected to see more and I really didn't. So maybe they were all out with you. I don't really know. But I did see a lot of rabbits, a lot of birds. I don't know what they were. I didn't see a roadrunner. I was really hopeful that I would see a roadrunner, but I didn't see a roadrunner. But mostly it was just, oh, go ahead.
Well, I bought that mug.
Oh, you did buy a mug with a roadrunner on it?
So
only one of the many things you bought from that gift shop.
Yeah.
You kind of cleaned them out, Daniel.
Well, I did some damage at the thrift shop because I will justify anything if I want it. So my justification was, well, we didn't pay to stay here, so I might as well
put your money into the local economy. Is that what you're thinking?
I'm supporting them, but also they're supporting me with new things. So I will just note, because it was so notable to me, that the Frank Lloyd Wright gift shop at Taliesin West is exceptional. The prices are really good. They have a huge variety. They still design things based on his design. So there's a really beautiful menorah that they sell. We got to meet the designer. I got 2 sets of salt and pepper shakers just cause. It was great. It was great.
Yeah. You were really into that gift shop. It's funny. Pretty much everyone that you talk to, you would say, oh, I really love the gift shop. So
they need to hear it.
They need to hear it. Yeah. Some other things that we did there that we didn't talk about on the minisode last week, and they don't really fit anywhere else, though, so I thought I'd put them now, is that we took this tour of the archives, which was pretty neat. And we got a special look at Frank Lloyd Wright's Asian art collection. So he was a collector of many things. And one of those things was Asian art. Rebecca was so nice. She showed us all of those. And it was kind of, when we went in, they were all laid out because there were some, I believe, grad students there on a field trip. I don't know if they were art students or whatnot, but everything was laid out and we were really into it. And of course, Daniel and I take pictures of everything, right? So we held up our cameras and the first thing that she said was, or we were told was well, really can't take any photos of the items in here. And so we rallied, we rebounded quickly, right? We went, rats.
We accepted it.
We accepted the truth and we took the whole thing. And then at the very end, she was like, well, you guys can take pictures, but not really share them with anyone. So I just kind of grabbed, kind of half-heartedly held up my camera and snapped a few things. I thought, I'm going to show my son this because he's really into Asian art. And then later we got a really nice message from her. And she said, I changed my mind or after thinking about it more, you may share the pictures that you took. Just run it by me so that I can give proper credit to the artist or the wherever we got this art piece. But unfortunately, neither you nor I had really taken any photos worth sharing. So we're going to have to give a verbal account of a very visual tour.
Yeah. It's amazing how bad of a photographer I can be when all I'm thinking about is like, oh, personal reference. Like, I just want to have that pattern in my memory box. So yeah, we may post some of those, but fair warning, they're not great.
They're not good. No.
But it was incredibly cool to see those spaces. So if you go back and listen to episode 140, you'll hear Pat sort of describe the space that she's in while doing the interview, which was one of the like new archive spaces. So they've clearly invested a lot into creating like museum quality archival spaces for all of the artifacts and things, which they continue to go through. So super, super cool to see that in real life. We both were absolutely enamored with the smell.
Right.
It smelled so new.
It did. Everything smelled so good. And they said, well, I think those are actually just VOCs. So
and then we're like, breathe it in.
Yeah, it smells so good. Yeah, give me fresh paint all day long. Yeah.
Yeah.
We also got to meet Nicole, and she was one of the archivists. And that's where we saw all those receipts, which we weren't sure what we were going to see. On the tour sheet, it was like, you're going to see photos. But what we really ended up being sort of mostly interested in, which may or may not surprise you, is that there were so many receipts for building materials and just the way that, I don't know, shopping, to what they bought at the store. And they kept all these receipts because the whole property, they ran like a business. And what else did we see? You got really into like shingles, right?
I did get too embarrassingly into shingles. I was just going to say, like, that was so interesting because they have so much like documentation, things like receipts and letters and stuff, but nobody was at the time really like cataloging them and tying them to specific things. So it's this journey of figuring out if this thing is significant or not, or where it fits in. So like one thing that was totally fascinating to, I think, both of us was that there were receipts for the drafting tables.
Yes.
In other words, they were buying the drafting tables when we totally assumed that they had built the drafting tables because they built everything, right?
Right.
But no, they didn't. That was really interesting. I loved seeing Allen Ginsberg wrote one of Allen Ginsberg's books. I can't remember which one. He presented to Frank Lloyd Wright and they showed us the signed copy, and he had drawn this insane portrait of Frank Lloyd Wright on the
that's right. I'd
dedication
forgotten
page.
about
It was
that.
so cool. Yeah, just like stuff you don't get to see.
Well, another thing I learned from Nicole that has become a part of this episode is the music. So any music that you hear today is from a playlist that was created from the time that everybody was living communally here on the property. Music was a very important part of Frank Lloyd Wright's life. I did not know that. Nicole made a playlist, sent it to me. All of it is Creative Commons or covered under Creative Commons licensing. So we've added it to this episode.
Oh, how cool. Thank you, Nicole. We touched on this in the minisode, I think, but I think one of the things that was just so fascinating was learning more about the community aspect of this place. And like, I am a true crime person, listen to a lot of it. So I'm always like, is this a cult? I think.
Maybe.
It really is just fascinating, no matter how you look at it, of a bunch of people deciding to do this project in the middle of the desert in the 1930s and create art and also survive, which just feels, what a dichotomy.
They ate most of their meals together. They did pageants and plays together. They played music together. They also hosted plays in the theater space that they have. We talked about the shelters out in the desert. People would come, they would pay there to come and work and learn from Frank Lloyd Wright. And their part of the experience was that they were basically pointed out into the open desert and said, go make yourself a place to live while you're here.
I think they furnished them with a 10 by 10 foot concrete pad, if memory serves, or 8 by 10 foot or something. And it's super interesting you'll hear a little bit in the interview later, but it also just all the different perspectives of people who were there. And some people obviously left with a pretty negative experience, feeling like they had been sort of exploited and all of this. But then there's also the people who chose to remain there for their entire lives and obviously absolutely loved the place. So I thought this was kind of interesting. I'll just throw this out there. Before I left, I started to read, before I realized I don't know how anymore, The Fellowship, The Untold Story of Frank Lloyd Wright and the Taliesin Fellowship by Roger Friedland and Harold Zellman. So this is a quite dense book, but it is a really good, pretty comprehensive history. Also one that gets into sort of some of the nitty-gritty, potentially controversial, uncomfortable perhaps, especially for people who were there as residents, not scholars looking at it, from the future. So then, as point counterpoint, I purchased Tales of Taliesin by Cornelia Brierly, whose living room I slept in for 3 nights, 4 nights? I don't know.
Yeah.
And she lived the majority of her adult life at Taliesin West and obviously had a very different view of that time. So yeah, couple interesting resources if you are curious.
I'll link those in the show notes. So before we go on break, I have to ask you, knowing what you know about communal living, let's say that you and I were transported back to the time and we had an opportunity to do that. First question is, would you do it? And the second question is, do you think you'd like it once you got there?
Here's the thing. I think I would have enjoyed parts of it. I don't think I have it. The learning part in my younger days, sounds like they did a lot of cocktails. I think the relentless aspect of you work all day and then you go home to your desert shelter with no plumbing and no electric and no air conditioning, which feels very important in the desert. So I have to say no. I don't think I'm cut out.
That's a no from you, right?
What about you?
I think, yes, I would have taken...
You're tougher than me.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
we're not going to sugarcoat it. I'm tougher than you. The answer is yes, I would have taken the opportunity. And yes, I probably would have liked it. But here's why. First of all, I would have thought it was a great adventure, an absolutely great adventure. So there's no way I would have missed the opportunity had it been presented to me, because I've pretty much tried to live my life taking all of those crazy opportunities. As far as the shelters, I can tell you that I may not have liked them all the time. But what I think probably happened in a communal living situation like this, as it does happen when you have a somewhat hierarchy, even if you're trying to say you have a level playing field, I'm picturing the shelter folks having a really good, fun time separately from the people who were living in the core campus and in the apprentice apartments. So I think that the shelter people made their own fun, and I would have been all for that.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I'm just thinking about the physical comfort aspect. I'm such a baby.
All right. Well, we do need to take a break.
All right. We'll be right back.
Our interview with Fred Prozzillo is next. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Window Course. The Window Course, created by Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, is a step-by-step, do-it-yourself program that will teach you, the homeowner, everything you need to know to successfully restore your wood windows. It's self-paced, so you can go as fast or as slow as you need, and there are several price points that will fit your needs and budget.
Bear with me on this one. Spring is right around the corner, and so now is the perfect time to get ready to restore the windows at your house. Study up with the Window Course. It has all the information you need all in one place.
And Scott is giving his students a special deal. If you sign up for the Lifetime Access Package or the training package, then you'll get a free infrared paint remover, and that's a $100 value.
Scott is also offering the Window Course with a money-back guarantee, and he's offering you, True Tales from Old Houses listeners, a special discount. So for 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, which is native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
And unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as conditions change. This makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
Now, you used a Sutherland Wells product on your new porch floor. Which one did you use, and did you like it?
I absolutely loved it. I used the exterior polymerized tung oil in medium luster. I did 3 coats. It is absolutely gorgeous.
Sutherland Wells has an entire product line for whatever a person is working on, whether it's siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it. They have a product for it.
So to learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells. That's WELLES, SutherlandWells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TrueTales.
Welcome back.
Hello and welcome.
Our guest today is Fred Prozzillo, a longtime team member of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation with a special connection to Taliesin West. We recorded this interview in John Rattenbury's apprentice apartment. And if you'd like to see photos of that, I've got them right on the blog post at truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
I'm Fred Prozzillo. I'm the Nord McClintock Family Vice President of Preservation and Collections. So I oversee the preservation of Taliesin, Taliesin West, and the collections of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation.
Wow. Hi, Fred. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome to my apartment, the John R. apartment here, which you've been in, I'm sure, plenty of times.
Yeah, many times.
Our friend Pat, who kind of set this whole thing up, she said, you've got to talk to Fred. So we're happy to have you here. We'd like to start by sort of, if you could give us some context about what you do here. What's your connection here to Taliesin West?
I'm in charge of the care of the buildings, basically. I was an apprentice at Taliesin. I did my master's here from 97 to 2000, received a master's degree in architecture, lived and worked here on the site. And when you're a member of the fellowship, part of Taliesin, these buildings and this place kind of gets in your blood. And so, it's always been a part of me since my, time here. After I graduated and I was practicing here in Phoenix, I always helped out with the school, whatever they needed. And in 2012, I came back. They invited me back to head up the preservation program. So during Wright's lifetime and the time of the fellowship running the property, when this community lived here, managed the property, managed the life on the site, everyone took care of their own space. If you had a leak in your room, you jumped up on the roof and you patched it. By 2010, things had changed in the community. Things had changed with the organization, and they were looking to professionalize the preservation and the care of the site. We're a National Historic Landmark. We were in the middle of being nominated as a World Heritage Site. So there was a hope within the organization to raise the level of care. Not that they weren't doing a great job beforehand, but with these changes, especially with the World Heritage, wanted to kind of elevate things. So I came back when I was an apprentice. I took some time, went overseas. I was interning at Angkor Wat in Cambodia on the temples there. I did some intern work in Kathmandu, working on the historic Ghats along the Bagmati River. So historic preservation had always been part of my interest in architecture. I think that's why they asked me to come back and help out. So since 2012, we've been organizing this apartment, working on setting up policies for proper care, how we attack the work here. And we've been just plugging along ever since 2012, really.
Well, it's great. Before we move on to talking about Taliesin West, you mentioned a World Heritage Site, and I've heard that designation, and I've been to places before that were designated UNESCO World Heritage Sites. What does that mean, and what is that designation?
Through UNESCO, and there's the World Heritage Program, and that's sites, buildings, it could be landscapes that UNESCO is designated as having outstanding universal value. So places that really need to be preserved for mankind, things like the pyramids of Giza here in Arizona, the Grand Canyon. These are important sites for all of us to understand our existence, our human existence here in the world, right? And what man has done, built, and how we've cared for the environment. So it's a great honor. It was a long process to get the property through and nominated. We're part of a serial nomination. So it's actually 8 sites, 8 Frank Lloyd Wright sites that make up the Frank Lloyd Wright nomination. And these sites represent main principles of Wright's work. So it's not like these are the best sites. These are the sites that represent his philosophy and his ideas around architecture. So really here at Taliesin West, we were focused on, because of our procession through the site, we represent that outstanding universal value of Wright's that he established processes and ways to move through site and experience the space. So it's a great honor, and we're really proud of that. It's brought a lot of attention internationally to us, which we're happy to receive, that recognition. And also guests from around the world. This is a bucket list place for many people to come and visit. So that makes it exciting.
How many visitors do you get a year?
Here at Taliesin West, we get about 100,000 visitors through the site, which is pretty good.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
So before we kind of get more into current events, I wanted to know what it was like to actually study here and get your master's. And obviously, it's quite a different program than sort of your standard architecture degree. So if you could talk about maybe kind of how it was different. And I know that the school still exists in a form, but not on this campus. So tell us more.
I decided to go back for my master's in architecture after having been out of school for a number of years. And I wasn't really interested in going back into a program where, I just went on a campus and sat in the classroom and was lectured at. The program, Taliesin, it was experiential learning. So it was, as Wright would have said, it's learn by doing. He believed that you got out there in the world and you did things and you learned by, the process of doing. So, this program, you learned construction, joined the construction crew, the facilities team on the site. So you worked on the buildings for a while so that you understood how things went together and how, materials work. After having that experience, then you could move into the drafting studio and you apprenticed under one of Wright's apprentices, so the architects at the time. It was an amazing experience. It was obviously different than going back to a traditional university. I loved having that hands-on experience and being able to get out here and do things. And part of the program, the master's degree, was to build a desert shelter, a shelter that you would, live in. That was a big attraction for me, to actually be able to build something while I was.
Did you build one that's currently here?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Like all buildings and like Taliesin West, maintenance is important to structures. If you don't maintain your structures, do routine maintenance like you would have to do on your house, things fall apart and fall down. Unfortunately, after 20 years of not keeping up with my shelter because I was keeping up with Taliesin West and Taliesin, I lost my roof to a major microburst that came through one last year.
We call that returning to the earth. Your structure is returning to the earth.
It's all organic, right? It's part of the work here. Yeah. So
we've not explored that part of the desert yet. So we just got here last night. And so we're going to go out, I think, later today.
It's a popular tourist attraction, I guess you'd say, here on site. I mean, everybody asks about the shelters and wants to go out. And we do have tours of them throughout the week. And today, right now, it's a beautiful day. Good day to walk out in the desert.
I love that they're all different too. Somebody had an idea like, I want to make mine look like a flying sail and I want to make mine look like a spaceship or something. I'm just using that as an example. Everybody had their own idea of what they wanted their shelter to look like.
Yeah, that's all part of the education that you receive here. Wright didn't want you copying his style, quote unquote. He wanted you to absorb his principles, his ideas, make them yours, and then do something with those ideas. Right. So my structure shouldn't look like a Frank Lloyd Wright structure. It should look like how I interpret his ideas and relate my structure to the land upon which I'm building. So, so they are all very different just because of that fact. Right?
I'll try to state this succinctly, but it's my strong understanding that during Frank Lloyd Wright's life at this place is very all-encompassing communal lifestyle. You're in it. You don't leave, you're in it. Do you have a sense of sort of how the culture changed in the 30 plus years between his death and when you came here, and what sort of remained the same about the experience?
It was pretty close when I arrived in 97 to the basic structure of Wright's time. You applied, if you were accepted, you came on your own track. So I came in November, my buddy came in March, it was all on you, right? It was all just learn by doing. By the time I got here in 1985, the school was accredited. So there were a few requirements that were added on to your time here to make sure you met the accreditation requirements. But you jumped into the community. You were assigned work duties during the week, and, one day you might be helping in the kitchen. Another day you might be doing landscaping or setting the dining room table. And this was all the way it was run back during Wright's lifetime. When you first arrived, you were on the construction crew. Once you proved you understood how things go together, you started apprenticing, all very similar. It changed a little bit after the architecture firm closed because many of the architects had come to a point in their life where they were retiring. And then so when the school didn't have a firm to apprentice in, it became a little bit more traditional in some sense. It was still, very heavy on the learn by doing. Yeah, I mean, Taliesin was more about a way of life than being a school. I mean, school was not a word that we used, but this was a community of artists that came together for a common cause of working on architecture, being creative together, living in community together.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, there were plays, there were people doing art, there were architects. Was that kind of creative work still going on at the same time when you were here as well?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. As I said, Taliesin's more a way of life. I was often told that the idea wasn't that you learned architecture and then that became your job and you did that during the day and then you had a life. Everything was life, doing the architecture, working in the kitchen, doing, plays as entertainment for the community. We just all lived together and worked together, and it was just life. It really was a different way of thinking about your existence, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I like that. Actually, there's we could carry that over to today's life where we're not working all day to have our free time. It's just building your life in a way that you want to live it.
Hopefully you find something that really inspires you, and then your work isn't work anymore, right? It's just life, right?
Speaking of, it seems to me that a program like this very much caters to the kid that doesn't want to sit there and read a textbook and wants to do their own thing and, figure. So it's interesting to me that out of that background, you went toward preservation. Could you talk kind of about what attracted you to that? Were you specifically attracted to preserving Frank Lloyd Wright's work or the act of preservation generally?
I think what drew me to preservation side is my appreciation for history. Grew up in a small town north of Philadelphia along the Delaware River. It's where, the birthplace of the American Revolution. So history was always a big part of my life growing up. I loved history. My undergraduate degree was in American history. So that, I think, really is what attracted me to this place, as well as the hands-on. It's the idea that this was this amazing and important historical site with this really interesting cultural heritage as well as, building. And so I think that's what really got me into it. I love history. I love studying about how things have developed and come over time. And that's a fun part of preservation. I love the research. I can get lost in the archives and the images of this place and how it was put together, looking at the documents and the photos of these young men and women who are out here in the 1930s and 40s, middle of nowhere, just building Frank Lloyd Wright's winter home. What an amazing experience that must have been. Because, even in the 30s, well, especially in the 30s, Wright was an amazing figure in American society and culture. And so, yeah, I just think all that history added to pushing me over to the preservation side.
So specifically on this site, we recorded what we call mini-sode, which is the shorter version of our show in between the longer episodes. You'll be on one of the longer episodes. We were just talking about what we learned about Taliesin West becoming it started out as part of the earth. Eventually it may return back at some point. So what are the challenges of preservation here at Taliesin West?
There are a lot of challenges, obviously, in a site this large, a site that was constructed by young men and women who were learning by doing, a site that is meant to be a laboratory and to really be in constant change. Wright would come back here after spending the summers up in Wisconsin. He'd see the building at a fresh eye, and he'd go to work pointing his cane and telling the boys, all right, let's move this, let's change this, we're going to build this over here. And so, a lot of the details of the building, some of the details are not fully resolved because he was just kind of working things out. Others were done in a manner that maybe not great permanence was expected from what was done because he knew he'd come back and maybe want to change something, right? So that kind of philosophy of change and experimentation makes it really tough to preserve something, especially if something wasn't meant to be permanent. Right?
Yeah. Well, so there's no standardization. It would be really hard to come up with standards when things were very flexible. Yeah.
The principles of connecting with the land and integrating with the site, that's the big principle, right? And then that changes on how you're reacting to certain things and might change with the crew that was working that day. Did they have more experience than another crew putting things together? The mix of the concrete that makes the desert masonry walls changes across the site because different people were mixing the concrete. So yeah, it all lends to a a lot of complication.
I mean, even things like, I think the admin building was built after Frank Lloyd Wright's time. Is that right? Or did I misunderstand that? But so that would be completely different. I mean, it's the same. It blends seamlessly to our eyes. Someone who's really in the know could see something different than we see. But yeah, the masonry, like you said, the concrete would be different there. So there'd be a lot.
You can really trace the concrete development and the change of the concrete from the west end of the property where everything kind of started and everything developed moving eastward. If you look at the concrete right at the entry at the west end of the property, it's very different than the concrete at the end of the east property. I mean, it's just, they started refining things. They started using sand that they bought in town rather than dug out of the washes. So you can really track all this. You can read the building, as we say.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
The irony of doing a podcast about old buildings and stuff, we're constantly sort of having to explain things that are visual. So what kind of draws you to Frank Lloyd Wright's work specifically, and what has kept you interested for all this time?
Well, I think like Wright, I have a great appreciation of nature and our environment. Before I came out here and started living at Taliesin, I would camp every summer and, hike. And I think it's that quality of his buildings where he really connects you with the surroundings that I so appreciate. Things that you'll see in modernist architecture, the open floor plan, which they kind of pulled from Wright. He was the first one to do it in the 1800s. I think just this openness and this connection to your surroundings is what I really gravitate towards. When I graduated and had to leave the property and get my own apartment and start work, first place I had my little apartment, it nearly killed me because I was in this little apartment, these little punched openings for windows. I had completely lost this connection to my surroundings. It was really, really tough after living here where you have to walk outdoors to get from one space to the next, right? And, you have floor to ceiling windows and you're basically living outdoors when you're here. To go into that confined little apartment was a real shock to my system. Luckily, after I was able to get out of that apartment and buy a home, I was able to get something with a greater connection to my surroundings. And, and then when I was able to come back here in 2012 to head up the preservation and just be here every day, it was, a real joy. Yeah, I think it's just that how he has a way to look at the surroundings and really just connect you when you're indoors or outdoors,
I do know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something. I came in here yesterday. We arrived. What time do we get here? About 2.
Oh, it's
about
all
2.
Blur.
I know, it really is. So we got here about 1:30 or 2, and we both walked in this apartment, and we're just in awe of the light and looking at everything. And then I came back. We went somewhere, came back 2 hours later, and it was like a completely different space. And I was trying to explain that on social media, on Instagram. I was like, well, it's the same apartment, but it looks so different because the light is different. The sun's in a different spot. But the fact that Wright knew that would happen is just, it's really a credit to his talent because, well, and I guess that's part of architecture is understanding how buildings fit in space. But to someone like me, who's not an architect, to know that he thought of everything, where the sun hits the skylight, where it hits the, in the morning, where it hits in the evening. And yeah, it makes everything look different.
It is amazing. And he uses skylights and clear story windows and floor to ceiling windows on the north. It really does improve the quality of the space. When you have good light, that's what puts a space over the top for me. And even outdoors on the site, at the greatest times of the day is, sunrise and sunset, when that sun gets or is low on the horizon and it's casting big, long shadows from all the cacti and, the trees and the buildings, and the color changes as the sun sets, it goes through these beautiful amber colors. I mean, he was playing with all of that. It's not just the light quality in the interior spaces. It's, where he puts a terrace and where he focuses your view when you're sitting outside, that, he's capturing all of that as well. And it's really something.
The windows look almost more like paintings, like you're looking at big paintings.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. This morning I woke up in the bedroom and they have the clear story windows, and I kind of just sat up in bed and the sun was just coming up and there was a cactus like sort of backlit there. And I thought, all right, that just looks like a painting, like a desert painting. And
that's all done purposefully. I mean, he has set that up for you. He has these ribbon windows and he frames them with mullions and he is creating,
pictures.
Art.
Yeah.
You,
art.
Right?
Yeah.
He was a big fan of Asian art, and he's collected many Asian screens over time. And they're all nature, not all, a lot of them are nature scenes. And at his home in Wisconsin, Taliesin, in his living room, he set up the series of ribbon windows looking across at the Welsh hills. And they truly become screens, and they change over the seasons, colors change, the landscape changes. So yeah, it's like natural art.
Obviously have a very large job between this site and the other sites. How do you manage that? Are you in Wisconsin a lot? How does this work?
I have a director of preservation for Taliesin West and a director of preservation for Taliesin. So I work with them. They really run the day-to-day things. I work with them on the strategy on, how to attack the preservation work and the planning. I'm up in Wisconsin 3 or 4 times a year and, working with the team up there. It's a lot. I often joke, I have gray hair now, but it was, black when I started 12 years ago. It's a big task, but it's fascinating. I learn something new every day, and I see the buildings even after being here every day for 13 years in this position. I still see something new. It's always.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask you that. Are you ever just on the property and standing somewhere and then you just look and realize, oh, I never noticed that before? We were visiting Pat yesterday down there, and we saw the axe that was in the wall of the desert. What is it? Desert masonry. Yeah, there was like a little axe there that somebody put there. Are you still finding these like little Easter eggs all over this property?
Yeah, you notice things because all these walls were built by young men and women. And so you'll see things. And the walls are also reconstructed over time, as Wright changed things. So if you look deep enough into the desert masonry, it starts telling you a story. You can see cold joints, between different pores of concrete and things that start to show. And you can look at that and then go back and look at the historic images and start to piece together, the evolution, the chronology of the building development. So yeah, it's fascinating. And then really, I think the big thing is just being in different locations on the site throughout the day. As you just mentioned, as the sun changes, it creates new shadows and different colors. And yeah, so I'm always seeing something new, which makes it really exciting and interesting to be here every day.
It's pretty magical.
It is magical. Yes. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Repaint Studios. Okay, confession time, Daniel. In the past, how did you store your paint tray when you were mid-project?
I will admit, I used cheap plastic liners and then I stored them in the trash can.
Well, you are not going to get any judgment from me because I used a garbage bag and that was an icky, sticky mess. But now I use the repaint tray.
Okay, I do too. So let's spread the word.
Billy, the inventor, knew that this was a problem for so many of us, so she created the solution. And now her woman-owned business is disrupting the paint industry. The repaint tray solves that mid-project paint storage problem. It has a reusable liner, an airtight lid, and it keeps your paint fresh for weeks.
Weeks, like weeks and weeks.
It's like Tupperware, but for your paint tray.
Exactly. And the tray itself, I'd like to note, is super heavy duty metal, so it doesn't slide around or wobble or bend. Plus, when you're done painting, you can just let the paint dry right in that silicone liner, and then you get to peel it out, which is really very satisfying.
The tray, silicone liner, and lid are built to last, which is better for you and the planet. It's the last paint tray you'll ever need, so save those garbage bags for the trash can.
Snag one for yourself at repaintstudios.com.
And for 10% off your order, use our coupon code TrueTales10. That's the number 10. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Old House Hub, brought to you by My Old House Fix. Daniel, I have a question for you, and you can answer for our listeners. Have you ever spent hours scrolling Facebook groups, Reddit threads, obscure websites, and random YouTube videos trying to find answers about your project?
Of course I have. And then half the time I end up on a deep dive where I come out 3 hours later. I know everything about Victorian paint colors, and I still have zero idea how to fix my house.
Exactly. And that is why we are excited to tell everyone about Old House Hub from My Old House Fix.
It's like your headquarters for all things old house. It's an exclusive online community where you can gather resources, browse archives by topic, connect with fellow enthusiasts, and get expert advice. It's a place to share your passion without getting lost in the endless social media feeds.
And there's no creepy AI algorithm suggesting totally unrelated content. It's just good, meaningful conversations with people who get it. No more scrolling, no more headaches, just connection and answers.
I love that. It's kind of like old school internet for old house lovers. The best part is right now, True Tales from Old House's listeners can get a 1-year membership to the Old House Hub for free with the coupon code TrueTales.
That great deal is only available during this season of the podcast. When season 12 ends, the deal ends.
So don't wait. Visit oldhousehub.com to join the Old House Hub community for free and finally have a go-to place for all your old house questions, projects, and inspiration. Do you have a favorite Wright building, structure, campus?
People ask me that. I guess I'd have to say Taliesin West, just because I'm here all the time. I just kind of become part of the building, really. I'm just attached. And there's something about this environment, the Sonoran Desert, that, people often say, there's a strength or a power in the desert. But I think, if you spend enough time here, you really start to understand that and see it. Just the way this building is built into the landscape, connects to the land with this desert masonry, where it almost looks like the building just grew right out of the rock and sand of the desert floor. There's nothing, no other works of Wright or anybody else that looks like this or feels like this, or, so I would have to say this is probably my favorite. Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the roof and the windows, because we just learned when they started coming to Taliesin West, that it was basically sort of open air, that there was maybe canvas awnings and no glass. And I know there's an initiative, we just learned about that this morning, to sort of work on adapting.
Basically restoring.
Idea. Yeah, restoring it, but also we needed to have some modern upgrades to deal with the weather, because the weather is really harsh here. So go ahead. I don't want to.
No, so Wright always referred to this property as his winter camp, not his winter home. So that's very telling right there, just how he spoke about the place. It was intended to be a place where he came just for the winter to wait out the cold of Wisconsin. And he was really, again, this connection to nature, he was really here to just experience the desert. And so, these buildings were just giant pavilions that he inhabited during the winter months. So it was just his winter camp. And so that camp-like quality, that kind of environment, is what we're hoping to restore here at Taliesin West. Glass didn't come into the property until around 1946. So that's almost 10 years after they started construction. So anywhere where you see glass would have had a canvas flap or a canvas panel over it that you could open or, remove to open up the spaces. It was kind of like a giant Bedouin tent.
Yeah.
There were
That's kind of what I have in my head. Yeah. Vision.
We have these very romantic images from, that time. Piles of citrus in the corner, skins on the furniture, Navajo rugs. It really quite beautiful. And they were just, connecting with the environment. And so that's a value in the building that we would like to bring back. We use a values-based preservation approach here at Taliesin West. So rather than picking a period as significance and going back to that period, we look at the inherent values of the site, things like your spatial experience, what it was in the environment, characteristics of the environment, like this idea of materiality. There was canvas roof instead of hard acrylic, or, and so we're looking at these values and using them to help inform our preservation decisions. And so, we would like to bring the roofs that were originally just canvas, cotton duck canvas wrapped around a 2x4 frame and stepped between beams. We'd like to bring that value, that quality back to the site. I think it would be amazing to walk into the drafting studio and have it be just this large pavilion fabric roof that moves as the wind moves and, over it. And we're hoping to install this fabric roof system on Wright's office, which is a smaller structure, install that for a year or two, test it, tweak it, improve it, change it. And then after a couple of years, hopefully have a system that we're really happy with, and then employ that system on the drafting studio and Wright's office, living quarters.
So I guess I already need to make a correction because I think on the mini-sode, I blew it and I said that there was a period of significance, but I thought it was the period of significance would have been like the years that Wright was here.
That's correct. That's what we call the primary period of significance that we can look at to make decisions within these values.
Correct me if I'm right, but it seems like sort of the values part of it might come in more when you are talking about a new solution that is based on, an old design. So like what you're describing, I read a little bit like this much about that you have 3D mapped these buildings and are using that technology to design this roof system, something like that.
Yeah, we've done that. Obviously, we use technology to help us plan for the preservation work. There has been, and there will hopefully always be, a long life here at Taliesin. We have the primary period was when Wright was here, 38 to his death in 59. Then there was what we call the Ogilvana period, when his wife and the fellowship lived here and carried on the work and continued the practice. And then after her passing in the 80s, the fellowship continued to live and work here, right? So that's a third period. So yeah, while we use the values-based preservation approach to make the preservation decisions, we look to that primary period of Wright's time to really kind of focus the values that we are looking at.
Are there emerging preservation technologies that you find sort of particularly exciting or useful for sites like this?
The world continues to evolve from Wright's time, and new technologies are around all the time. I think Wright would have loved to have been around today with the technologies. He was always pushing the limits with the materials and things that were available to him, right? So we hope to continue that legacy of innovation and, exploring technologies here on the site with everything that we do. So we now partner with universities from around the world. They come here and they learn about Wright and his ideas. We partner with preservation programs to come on site and have preservation students learn on the job, learn by doing, and things like X-raying the buildings, right? We're now able to kind of look inside the structure and explore Wright did. There's often these thoughts that he was always pushing the limits with materials and that some of the concrete structures here don't have reinforcing in them. So we're able to now, with penetrating radar, look and see, just what did Wright put in the concrete roofs? What kind of rebar was he installing? Because we have stories that he would really stretch it, put it to the limit, right? And try to see if minimal steel reinforcing would work, right? And play with different things. We have a story that the light tower at the entry of the property, he didn't have a lot of money, didn't have money for steel. So he took the frame of a old truck and put that in the tower for the steel reinforcing. These are stories that, have survived over time. I'd love to know if that's true, right?
Sure.
So we've been working with the University of Pennsylvania, their preservation program, to have them on site to look at the structures, X-ray, use radar to look in and try to debunk some myths or prove them, right? That's exciting. That's a lot of fun.
I wonder if this is going to be like ignorance is bliss. It's coming down, everyone. It's coming down. When you find out what's really in there, but what can you do? It's been here this long. It's going to either stay or
and
not.
Luckily, the masonry is in pretty good shape. We don't have anything that there is work that has to be done, obviously, but the desert masonry has stood the test of time and it's in good shape. So we're happy about that.
It's super fascinating.
Have there been any surprises as you've been practicing your X-ray vision?
I wouldn't say surprises, just we don't always find what we expect, but we don't always get a full answer either, right? It takes a lot of work to figure some of this stuff out. Usually what we find is just more questions. It's fun. It keeps everything going, but there's a lot to explore.
So how many years have you worked here now, this time?
So 13 years.
Okay, so 13 years. So I guess there would be, you'd come here and then at some point during the time you've been here, you've had this master plan. You've created a master plan for what you hope everyone can do to the best preservation of this property. How often do you revisit that and does it change? And, did you recently review it and now you're working 20 years out? Or how does that work in this field?
We try to look at the preservation master plan every 5 years and see our assumptions holding up or things changing. We haven't made any major changes. Preservation work is expensive. We're a nonprofit. Funding is always an issue, funding either for work or human resources. So a lot of the time, planned projects are pushed off or we have to hold on because of issues. COVID pandemic threw a monkey wrench into everything. I wouldn't say set us back, but it just paused everything. And then we had to regroup, kind of pick up, go back and go, what was that going? How were we doing this? And so there are challenges in that part of preservation. I think money is always a challenge. So we haven't had many, as I said, major changes to the plan, but we do look at it and refer to it all the time.
So I tend to be a really linear person. I don't know about you, Daniel, but for me, like if I were in this job, I would want to, checklist and I did that and I did that and I did that and I did that. But is it ever just sort of frustrating, or do you feel like we're just not getting anywhere? Or can you really look back and feel like, yeah, we accomplished that? I guess there's a certain amount of that. Hopefully you can pat yourselves on the back, but how frustrating is it?
It's super frustrating.
Yeah.
I walk around this property, and one of the problems is that I just see all the problems. I often have a hard time looking at how great things are because I'm like, but that has to, we got to do this, we got to do that. When I took on the work, first thing I did was a building assessment and created those lists, and we just started attacking, right? And just knocking off deferred maintenance. And as I look back 13 years, we've accomplished amazing things, really, with our small team, our limited budget. We've really done quite a lot. This property is in much better shape today than it was when I first stepped on property. But deferred maintenance continues because, as I said, we're always struggling with budgets and human resources. So, it's a couple of, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're always kind of balancing what needs to be done, what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be frustrating because I want to do more. There's so many interesting and wonderful projects to be done that I'm kind of anxious. I want to get in there and do it. But then, you always have these constraints that you have to deal with.
Sure.
And it's the same, I talk to people in charge of other historic properties, and they're all going through this. They all want to do more. People who get into this work are really passionate about what they're doing, and they want to do more, and they want to do the best by the buildings, but there are always limitations. We all struggle with the same issues, I think.
I would say we identify greatly, and most of our listeners do too, with that, because most of our listeners have old houses. So we're working with this deferred maintenance, and these are hopeful projects. And of course, we're always constrained by budget as well. So I think that's a problem that most of our listeners can identify with. So it made me think about, where, I don't know where you live now, and you don't have to tell us, but like, can you go home and relax? Or do you also go home and look around and think, gosh, that needs to be done. That needs to be done too. Like, how do you ever get any peace and quiet in your brain?
Yeah, no, not really. I have a home that was built in 1965. It's a wonderful mid-century modern building.
Good windows, I'm assuming.
Yeah, great. Very good. A lot of floor-to-ceiling glass, which is
cheap to cool.
Yeah. That's a bad thing in the desert. But, I care for this all day, and then I go home and I have another one to care for. But it's great. And I think, look, when you have these things to resolve and you're dealing with these big projects, you really do just have to create those lists, right? Look at the lists, try to knock off the low-hanging fruit when you can, right? But create a focus and a plan. The biggest problem in a lot of properties like this, where there is a lot of work that has to be done, is you start on something and then something catches your eye over here, and you have to jump, and you're like, I can just do this real quick, and then I'll jump back. You can't be attracted by the shiny penny. You got to stay focused, stay on your plan, knock off your list. And that's what we've really worked hard to do. And I think that's why we've been successful here, is that we made a plan, we have stayed focused, and we just kind of keep pushing to that end result.
Yeah. I think I'm going to take that as a directive for all of us.
I know. I'm like, stop talking about me. I'm right here.
I feel attacked. All right. That's fine. Well, this has been really great. If you had to, I'm just going to leave with one more question, I think. Do you have another question?
Go take it. Go for it.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay. So this was very new to us. And I think I mentioned this at the top of the interview. I know I mentioned it on the minisode, but we like to go into a place, we do some research, but we also like to be surprised. So we were greatly surprised when we got here. I think even more so of the type of property. So if somebody had not been here before and you wanted to encourage them to come, because you said there's 100,000 people that come here every year, maybe more visitation would be even better. This is a really special place. What would you want them to know?
If they came here?
Yeah. Or how would you encourage them to come see it? Like what would
Well, I would just say that you can't learn about Frank Lloyd Wright buildings in a book. You have to experience the space because that's what he was all about. Designing the space within, the experience that you have as the inhabitant of a space. And you can't always capture that on film in the glossy magazines. So I would encourage them to come here, go into the garden room, which was Wright's private living room, and sit down and look at how the space changes as you walk in, look at the windows, go around, sit down. How did the space just change as you sat? We let people sit here at Taliesin West and at Taliesin in Wisconsin. We believe you can't really truly experience the space behind velvet ropes. You have to get in, you have to sit down. So I would say, come, go into the spaces and sit down and just absorb. And you'll really pretty quickly, I think, get what Frank Lloyd Wright was telling you.
That's what we're going to do right after this, I think. All right.
For the second time today.
Yeah.
We already were in that room. And it was such a nice room.
It was, yeah. That's the room we took our shoes off in, right? We made ourselves right at
We had a
home.
real early morning.
Yeah.
In before anyone.
Well, thank you so much, Fred, for being here. Thanks for explaining what you do and really just inspiring, hopefully, our listeners to come visit for one. And
please do.
One thing I mentioned during the minisode, and I'll mention it again right now, is that because we might be using some of this video on YouTube, but we might not get to it for a while, Daniel and I have taken a bunch of pictures. Hopefully, before you leave, we can get a picture of all three of us together, and we will just put it together in a blog post on the website, truetalesfromoldhouses.com. So thanks again. Well, I am sad that our trip to Taliesin West is over. We had such a good time.
It lives on in my heart and my dreams.
It was the first time that we've done this together. Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
Me too.
Where are we going next?
I don't know. I think, let us know if you're out there and you have an idea of where we should go, or if you are in charge of a historic place and you think it'd be fun to have us visit. I think you could twist our arms and talk us into it without too much trouble.
Yeah, demonstrably you can.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. There are so many people to thank for these field trip episodes. Fred Prozzillo,
Nicole Richard,
the Rebeccas,
Rebecca from the Special Collections Tour, and a double dose of Rebeccas, Rebecca Hagan and Rebecca Barron for our property tour.
Leslie Shuchia for the tidiest research library we've ever seen. And of course, to our guardian angel,
Pat Evans, who put in so much work to make this field trip happen for us and make it unforgettable.
Also, many thanks to our sponsors, The Window Course, Sutherland Wells, Repaint Studios, and Old House Hub for making True Tales from Old Houses possible in the first place. We'll be back next week with a fresh mini-sode, and in the meantime, take care and keep celebrating the stories that make your old house a home. Until next time.
See you over on the mini.